think matters more? What Jesus said or how he did things? What do you think matters more? Well, I'll tell you for sure what we focus on is what he said, right? Most of the sermons that you hear, you can quote things he said. And you can look at all these things. And what he said is important, right? It shapes our worldview. It shapes our beliefs. It shapes our interactions with each other, like love your neighbor and, bless your enemies and, give up other things for the sake of eternity, those kinds of things. But the thing that I've been dwelling on in my personal study is not so much what he said, but how he lived and how he did things. And the reason that I'm kind of driven to this is I look at myself and I look at other people and I say, we know what Jesus said. Our worldview is shaped what he did by what he said. We've got a good basis in theology and understanding, but we're still stressed out. We're still burnt out. We're still pushed to the very edge of what we can handle. Is that really where we're supposed to be? I look at how Jesus did things, and some of the small stuff you notice is that Jesus not in a hurry. Like, when was the last time you weren't in a hurry? You remember a moment that you weren't in a hurry? He's not in a hurry. There's a point where Jesus does this very, very un-American thing. He preaches, and then he prays that night, and the next morning he's gone. He's off praying in the woods or something, and they come look for him like, hey, we got work to do. We got people over here. And he's like, no, I'm doing something more important. I'm praying. I'm resting. And that's not, like, we would all think of that as sinful, right? The idea that you would rest when there's work to be done. And I'll look at how Jesus lived and how he did things, and I just want to prepare you that for the next 6 months, this is going to come up. The idea of living, not just believing what Jesus taught, but living the way that Jesus lived. Because when we look at discipleship, one of the goals of the disciples, at least as far as rabbinical discipleship, was not just to believe what the rabbi believed, but to behave the way the rabbi behaved, to live like the rabbi, to become the rabbi. And if we're going to do that, we can't just focus on what Jesus said, but how he did things and how he lived. And I've got this contention, I've got this belief that if we adopted not just the beliefs of Jesus, but the lifestyle of Jesus, we would be a whole lot better off. When I look at what Jesus did and how Jesus did things, and we're talking about discipleship, it's impossible for me not to notice that there's something very different about how Jesus practiced discipleship than how we do. All right. So we talk about discipleship. We talked about it last week. We had discipleship events this week, and we talked about this week. But if you missed all of that, just to give you an idea of what we talk about when we're talking about discipleship is we're talking about this idea of cooperating to make each other better as followers of Jesus. That's all it is. Hebrews chapter 10 describes it like this. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, which is not up there, but Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. I'll just read it to you, and you can look it up if you want to in those Bibles that you have with you. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says this, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. That this idea that we are people who come together not just to listen to somebody preach, but we come together to stir one another up. That's to get you moving, right? Get you excited. Stir you up to love people, to love God, and to do the things that God would have you to do. Stir you up to love and good works, and to encourage you. And this is essentially what discipleship is. Like, if we're going to take two verses and make them a description of what we do in discipleship, it's stirring up and it's encouraging. And that's allowing somebody else to come into your life, give them permission to know what's going on in your life, to share with them privately, not stuff that gets shared with everybody else, not the stuff that goes on the group text, but to share with them privately so that they can encourage you and they can stir you up. That's discipleship. That's what we're talking about. And we look at the way that Jesus did this, and really when he started doing that, it's very different than how we do it. And so I just want to read you, and hopefully we'll read it together, depending on what slides I told Jake to put on here, we'll read it together. But I just want to read to you a section from the middle of Jesus' discipleship process with the 12. And I want you to tell me, don't tell me. Y'all remember that time that guy came in and started talking back to me during church? We talked about football for a little while in the middle of the sermon. I want you to just think about this to yourself. What is different about what Jesus is doing here with discipleship than what we do? Let's just read it. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 16, hopefully. We're going to start in verse 13. Look at that. All right. Matthew chapter 16. I told them the right slides. Matthew chapter 16, we're going to start in verse 13. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that the Son of Man is?" Did you know Jesus gave his disciples tests? They were oral exams. He gave them tests. I don't know of any essay tests, although many of them did write very long essays, but he didn't grade them. What we've got is Jesus giving his disciples a midterm examination. And I say midterm because our best guess, just looking at the timeline of things, is that the 12 have been with him for about 2 years at this point. 2 years that they've been with him. And he gives them a test. It's a 2-question test just to kind of figure out where they're at. And he says this. First, who do people say the Son of Man is? Well, this is really interesting, okay? Because he doesn't say, in Matthew anyway, the recording in Matthew, he doesn't say, who do people say I am? He says, who do people say the Son of Man is? The Son of Man is a term that's used in Old Testament prophecy to refer to the Messiah, that one would come from God. And he's claiming that title for himself right now. And they understand that because they answer that question directed at him. It's not just, he said, it's like if you asked, who's the Antichrist? The assumption is not that you are the Antichrist and you're trying to get them to figure out, but you're just talking philosophically, who is that? But they understand that Jesus is talking about himself. Who do people say that I am? I, the Messiah, the one that was prophesied to come, who do people say that I am? And they answered him. And it seems like we get this snippet, this one sentence, but probably what happened is they gave different answers, right? He asked them, opened the question. I don't know if he did like I did and asked the question in a small group and takes about a cookie to give people time to answer. But he asked the question and they got multiple answers. But the summary answer is this. Some say John the Baptist, which kind of makes sense that he would say they were John the Baptist. John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin. He came first. He was there and he was the one preaching. People came from all over the region to come and hear John the Baptist preaching. They baptized him. But that kind of makes sense because John the Baptist had been beheaded and some people thought he wasn't actually beheaded, but rather Jesus was him and he had a different identity and come out and preach. That's kind of a good answer. Some people say that he is Elijah. This one's a little bit more of a stretch, right? Because Elijah lived several hundred years before this. He is the prophet. Like, if you talk about prophet, Elijah comes to mind first. He's the one that stopped the rain. He is the one that started the rain. He brought people back from the dead. Elijah is the prophet. And some people say he's Elijah, which makes sense because Jesus was doing a lot of big miracles, more miracles than anybody else that was recorded in the Old Testament. Jesus was doing miracles, and they thought maybe this is Elijah because Elijah's the big miracle prophet. Maybe he's Elijah that comes back. It also makes a little more sense because the last 2 verses of the Old Testament in the book of Malachi say this, say that before the Messiah comes, Elijah will return. So the thing they're looking for is Elijah. That's what they're looking for. And so they think, oh, this must be Elijah. But he's not Elijah. Jesus, in fact, said that Elijah himself was not coming back, but rather it would be somebody like Elijah. And he said it was John the Baptist. And if you read through the Old Testament and you get to 2 Kings, you see this description of Elijah. And the description of Elijah, the Tishbite, is that he wore camel hair garments, he lived in the desert, and he ate locusts and wild honey. And then when you get to John the Baptist, the immediate description of him is that he wears camel hair garments, he lives in the wilderness, and eats locusts and honey. Like you can see that this is a continuation of Elijah. And so some people think that you're Elijah from the last 2 verses of Malachi. Okay? And some people say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. These people are just guessing. It's not Jeremiah. There's no reason to think it was Jeremiah. Jeremiah was dead. They know when he died. It's not Jeremiah, but they're just guessing. They don't know who this guy is. That's question 1 of this midterm exam. Then we get to question 2. And this question 2 is where I really want to focus. Question 2. I don't know what I sent you, Jake. That's not at all right. Question 2 is actually the next verses. Matthew chapter 16, verses 15 through 17. Say this. I'm glad I've got my notes today. I normally don't. Matthew chapter 16, verses 15 through 17 says this. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? The first question is, who do other people say the Son of Man is? And the second question is, who do you say that I am? This is a big question. Now, the ironic thing about this question is that it comes 2 years after they've been following Jesus full time. Who do you say that I am? And Peter says this in verse 16. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. He says to him, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Those are 2 answers. 2 answers. This is 1 and this is 2. 2 answers, okay? I could have done this, but that would be too easy. First, you are the Christ. This is the Greek word for Messiah, the one that was prophesied to come, the Son of Man. So what he's saying is, first of all, we believe that you are the one that's descended from David that was sent. That's what we believe. But we believe more than that. We believe this. There you go. He says, do you have the next one there? Because I want to look at it if you got it. You don't have it. Okay. I'm really sorry about that. Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He says, you're the Christ, that's the Messiah. Then he says this, you are the Son of the living God. Now, this doesn't sound like that big of a deal for us, right? Son of the living God. Because we think about Jesus as the Son of God anyway, but this is a really big deal. This is a really, really big deal. Because their view of God and our view of God is that there is one God. There's not a bunch of gods. We believe that God is one in 3 persons. And Jews today still struggle with our belief on this. They say that we believe in multiple gods, that they cannot grasp this idea of one God in 3 persons. But Peter picks up on something that will not be well articulated in Christian theology for a while. And that is this, and that is Jesus is equal to God. And you say, well, he didn't say he's equal, he said he's the son of. That doesn't make a difference for them. For them to say that something is the son of means that they are equal to. They are different from, but equal to. So you've got the son of the king, right? What does it mean to be the son of the king? It means that you are equal with the king. You may not have all of his authority right now, but one day you will take his position, you will have his wealth, you will be him. You are the son of the king, you are equal to the king, although he rules over everything, you're just next in line. For something to be the son of means that you're the one that's going to take on the position of. So you are equal to. So what Peter says here in the verses that you cannot read unless you got your own device, what Peter says here is that you, I don't fully understand this, Jesus, but you are God. You are the one that was sent to come. You're the Messiah that we've been looking for, but you are also God. And this is a huge deal, right? Because we still struggle with this concept. If you ask somebody to explain the Trinity, they're going to struggle with this concept. It's not well articulated for a long time. But Peter gets this at this moment. He has figured this out. But Jesus says this, you've not figured this out on your own. He says, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, which means Simon, son of Jonah. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. You don't know this because you figured this out. You know this because God has chosen to reveal this to you. You don't know this. Now, here's what's interesting to me about this whole thing, and when we get into how Jesus discipled and all of that, is this question of at what point Jesus started to disciple people. Because if you look at this question 2 years into their discipleship, what you see is a lack of understanding about who Jesus even is. An unbelief about who Jesus is. And what I see when I read through this is that Jesus did not call people to follow him once they were saved, but rather he clearly shared the gospel and then called them to follow him, and many of them were saved in the process of following. That's what I see. Now that's kind of a wild conclusion to come to for us, because that's not how we look at things and that's not how we do things. But if you read through Scripture, if you read through the Gospels and see what happened, you see these occasions over and over and over again where there are people who are called disciples, who are full-time disciples, who are not believers. The question is this: at what point were the 12 saved? Or the 11, depending on your view on that. At what point were these people saved? Were they saved before they started following Jesus? Did Jesus see them that they were saved and then start calling them? Or did he share the gospel with them and call them to follow with the expectation that they would believe as they follow, or not? It seems to me like it's the latter. And there's more stuff that verifies this. I'm really hoping, really hoping that we get my slides up there, because my other stuff has gone to sleep and it's just the way it is. So let's go on to the next one where we can see this kind of thing. We look in John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, we've got Jesus feeding the 5,000s. Do I have that? Yeah, oh good. John chapter 6, we got Jesus feeding the 5,000. And then from feeding the 5,000, lots of people become his disciples. And they're called disciples. They're called followers of Jesus. They follow him around everywhere. But Jesus realizes that they're not following him because they believe. They're following him because he's giving out free food and doing tricks. That's why they're following him. It's a great show. They've got food. They don't have to go to work. They're just following him because it's interesting to follow him. And he's okay with them following for a while, but there comes a point where he makes a really uncomfortable statement to get them to decide what they actually believe. Here's what it says in John chapter 6, verse 60. What he said was, if you don't leave everything behind and follow me, you're not mine. If you don't leave everything behind and hate even your family and follow me, then you're not my disciples. And this is what it says in verse 60 of John chapter 6. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, and who is this? Who is talking? Disciples, right? We're not talking about the 12. We're talking about disciples of Jesus. The gospel writers call them disciples. People that were following Jesus heard it. They said, this is a hard saying. Who can listen to it? But Jesus, knowing in himself that the disciples were grumbling about this, said, do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? He said, okay, you've got to decide. I'm saying difficult things, and you don't want to believe them. But what if I prove that I'm actually the Messiah? Is it worth following if I prove what I say about myself? Or is it only worth following me if what I say is easy to hear, it's only the things that I say that you enjoy hearing, that make sense to you, that things that you like to hear? Will you believe difficult things? Will you follow me through difficulty if you see proof of who I am? He says this in verse 63. It is spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words I've spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you who do not believe. Some of who? Disciples. Some of the disciples. Some that he calls disciples. Some that are following him who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning who those were who did not believe and who it was that would betray him. That Jesus knew that some of the people that he called disciples did not believe and would not believe, but he gave them the opportunity. And he said, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father. And after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So what do we learn from this? We've got a group of people that are called disciples, that are following Jesus, that have heard the gospel but do not believe. And Jesus brings them up a point along their journey for them to decide, do they believe or not? So when does Jesus start discipling people? Does he wait till they believe? Or does he share the gospel, call them to follow, invite them to follow, allow them to follow with the expectation that somewhere along the way they will make a decision? There's another story where Jesus is talking to the disciples and he said, look, you need to count the cost of following me. You need to decide whether it's worth it to follow me or not. Because it's a foolish king who says, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fight this army, but doesn't count his army to see whether he can do it or not. And it's a foolish builder who decides, I'm going to build this tower, but doesn't count what it's going to cost to build it and decide whether he can handle to spend that much money on a tower or not. He said, and it's a foolish thing for someone to decide to follow me, decide that they believe in me, say that they believe in me, but not be willing to pay the cost. Now, this is a weird thing to say to people who have already been saved. But to a group of people who have not decided what they believe yet, it makes a lot of sense. When we talk about how Jesus did things and the way that he did things and why that we did things, when we read through the Gospels, if we just kind of take our view of things off for a minute and instead read the Gospels to see what they actually say, what becomes really evident is that Jesus did not practice discipleship the way that we do. He did not share the gospel, and if they believed and if they showed up to church, then he would disciple them. But instead, he saw sharing the gospel as the sales pitch, and then he demonstrated what it looked like to follow him so that they would make a decision not from a sales pitch, but from the actual life of following him. He clearly shares the gospel. He allows them to follow. Some of them he called to follow, invited to follow. Some of them came to him and wanted to follow. But whoever it was that heard this and wanted to follow, he allowed them to follow, and he shared the gospel as he went. But he expects them to decide whether this is a thing that they're going to accept, or they're going to accept him as the Son of God. They're going to accept the hard things that he says. They're going to repent and trust him for their salvation or not just based on the sales pitch, but based on a life of following him. That's not what we do, right? What do? We clearly share the gospel, we invite them to church, and we pray for them until the next time that we share the gospel with them, right? But that's not what Jesus did at all. Not at all. What if we practice discipleship the way that Jesus did? And we took evangelism and discipleship and stopped separating them into different things, but combined them the way that Jesus did. What if we shared the gospel and then discipled those that were willing to be discipled, and along the way allowed them to decide, after seeing a life of following Jesus, after understanding this, deciding whether they were going to commit to him or not, they were going to place their trust in him or not? What if we did that? How different would it be? Now, we talk about this, and we've really got to understand what this would look like, because the way that we do discipleship here at Solid Rock, you've got a committed group of 3 or 4 people, 2, 3, 4 people, and they meet together regularly, and that's how we do that. And so it would have to be a little bit different. So let's talk about what that might look like. First of all, discipleship really comes down to 3 things. It's relationship, teaching, and accountability. That's what we focus on. Relationship, teaching, and accountability. You got to know each other and be close enough together to be willing to share things with each other. You've got to have actual things that you're trying to accomplish. You take the teachings of Jesus, you take what's shared here, you study on your own, whatever it is, and you teach each other, or one person teaches the other people through that, and then you hold each other accountable, right? That's the stirring up to love and good works. That's encouragement. That's how we look like. And the way that we do that would have to be a little bit different when it comes to discipling an unbeliever. And so let's talk about that for a second. So the thing that I do to encourage people to have a framework for discipling is to ask 3 questions. The 3 questions that you ask, if Kim and Brittany sit down doing their discipleship, the 3 questions that they ask, at least a version of them when they meet, is this: what are you reading? And I'm not talking about the latest novel that you're reading, although I highly encourage that, but not the latest novel you're reading, but what are you reading about in the Bible? And maybe that's y'all have agreed together that you're going to study this thing together. Maybe you're doing your own thing and they're just holding you accountable to do that. But you find out, what are you reading? What are you getting from God out of the Word? The second question that I ask you to ask is, what are you praying about? Because I want to pray with you. The thing that you're praying about is the thing that's going to be the biggest thing in your life, the thing that you're most concerned about. What are you praying about? And how can I pray about that for you? I want to ask you about that next week. I want to remember the thing that you said you were praying about, and I want to follow up with you next week. What are you praying about? And third thing I'm going to ask is, what you to ask is, who are you sharing the gospel with? I want you to, when you sit down together, to have to answer that question. Well, no one. Or, well, I've been praying about this person. And next week it's, I've been praying about this person. And the next time it's, I've been praying about this person. And instead of just being able to get away with that, when you meet with somebody every week and you ask them every week, you're kind of pushed into a position where you have to, put up or shut up, I think is the nicest way to say that. You have to do something. And those are the kind of questions I recommend that you ask when you're in a discipleship relationship like that. But it would obviously have to be different when it came to an unbeliever, because it's not a thing where you're discipling one another, but one person discipling another. Like, how would this actually look? So I think the first thing that you're going to want to do, and maybe not have a question for this, is after you share the gospel with them, you want to share the hope that you have. Share the hope that you have. Like, think about the hope that you have and what it is you could do. It's not just, hey, I'm not going to hell anymore. But it's instead, like, I have hope in my life. Why? Well, I've got this thing that I'm worried about, and I can't handle it on my own, so I get to go pray about it. I get to go talk to Dad about this thing. And share that hope with them. Like, hey, I know you're not a church person or anything like that, but I'm about to take the last 5 minutes of my lunch break, and I'm going to go have prayer before I go in the rest of the afternoon. I really need that. Is there anything I can pray about for you? It's a pretty simple thing, right? Here's what I want to encourage you to do. So you've shared the gospel with somebody that's not a believer. They say, I don't really know about that. I'm like, okay. And then you go to them and you say, how can I pray for you? And don't make it a thing of like, hey, I'm coming at you to do this thing for you. But I am going to Jesus. Can I take you with me? Can I take what you're worried about with me? And pray about it. Actually pray about it. And so we talked about this in the men's group the other night. Like the amazing power of just putting your hand on somebody's shoulder and praying with them means a lot to them, even if they don't believe in it. So you might say, hey, you say, they share something with you, like, hey, this is going on. I'm like, do you mind if I actually just pray for you right now? And put your hand on their shoulder and pray for them? And if they say, no, I don't really want to do that, that's cool. But you go and you pray for them, and then what you do is you actually pray. You pray for that thing. You pray for God to move. You pray not just that God will do whatever that thing is, but that God will show himself to them through that answered prayer. We had this, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when we have big kids events, we have a lot of Hindus come. And the way that you can tell the serious Hindus from the, just the cultural Hindus is they're the ones that sit in the lobby during the sermon, right? If you've ever come and you wonder, like, why are these Indians hanging out in the lobby? What is going on? They're the ones that don't want to hear the sermon, okay? We had, I had this one guy that brought his kid. And he's a Hindu. He does not believe any of what we believe. But his sister was in India and was trying to get over here to get a job. His sister-in-law is almost blind, and they needed to get her here to have a job. And he's like, I've prayed to all of my gods, and nothing is working. And so I went out. He didn't come to the sermon. He said, can you pray with me? I'm like, absolutely. So we prayed. I prayed for his wife. I prayed for his marriage. I prayed for the situation. I prayed for his sister-in-law. And we did all of that, and he left. About 3-4 weeks later, I see him again. And this time he has 2 women with him. And he said, we were praying and nothing was working, but you prayed for us, and she got moved here, and the surgery is scheduled. And so we came back because we need you to pray again. We need you to pray. So I've got my hands on these people, and I'm praying for them. And guys, I'm sharing the gospel in this prayer. I'm praying while they listen, that Jesus will show himself that he is the only God, that he is the true God, that they would see that he is the one that will answer this. And I'm sharing the gospel. They have come to me to ask me to take them to God. And I'm sharing the gospel with them. And that only happens when you say, man, can I pray for you? And then you beg God to show up in a way that convinces them that things don't just get better because they got better, but that they see God move. What if you didn't just share the gospel with somebody, but you shared the gospel with them, and then once a week, you went to them and said, hey, I'm about to go pray about this thing. You're on my mind. Is there anything I can pray about for you? And then the next week you said, hey, I've been praying about this situation. How's it going? What's happening? And then the next week you say, hey, I've been praying. What's happening? And you showed them that you who have hope are trying to extend hope to them. You're not just trying to get them to join your religion. You're not just trying to get them to come to your church, but you're trying to take them to Jesus and share what you have with them. How different would that go? What if you took them to Jesus and shared the help with you that you have with them, but then you also deepen the relationship? You said, hey man, what's your wife's name? Yeah, I know we talked a long time, but what's your wife's name? Like, how is she? What's your kids' names? How are they doing? And you just ask questions about the things that they care about. And then next week you say, hey, I've been praying for whatever her name is. It's good if you remember the name. I've been praying for her. Has that thing got any better? And you pray not just for them, but you care about the people that they care about. That you show them that there is something different about followers of Jesus. Because followers of Jesus care not just about themselves, the way everybody else does, or those that have something to offer them, but they care about all the people that Jesus died for, and you care about their problem enough to ask for this. Just show them you care. Deepen the relationship. You want to know the easiest thing that you can do to deepen your relationship with somebody? To show them that you care? Learn their name. You know that's a big deal? Your name is a big deal to you. And we say this thing, well, I'm just not good with names. You know who is good with names? Grant. And that's about it. Nobody's good with names. But hopefully you're not just like, nobody started off good at driving either. And hopefully you don't just say, you know what, I'm bad at driving, so I'm going to hit that car. Hopefully you do better. You get better. You listen. Learn people's names. Pay attention to them. The easiest way to learn somebody's name is to listen. Listen when they tell you their name. Listen and say it back to them. The reason that you're bad at names is not because you're bad at names. The reason you're bad at names is because you're so busy being concerned about what you're going to say next that you're not actually listening to them when they talk. Stop being concerned about how you're going to come off in the conversation and care about them enough to listen when they say their name. Listen when they say their kids' names. Listen when they say their wife's name or their husband's name. Listen when they talk about their mom's problems. And then when you get done, run back to your desk or go wherever it is and make a note in your phone with those things on them and then cheat. Okay? Cheat. The next week, read those notes and go back and say, hey, how is this person? And if you learn their names and you learn their kids' names and you learn their problems, that will go further to showing them that Jesus actually makes a difference in somebody's life than you sharing the gospel over and over and over and over again. Because you're not just saying, hey, you should get your free ticket to heaven, but showing there is something valuable about following Jesus, and you bring them along in that process. Joey, my brother, those of you who don't know, when we moved to Columbia, he was a lot better at this than I was. And part of it's because he worked in a big office. It's a big open office. And he got to talking to this lady. And she was very standoffish. Very, very standoffish. And so he was just kind of persistent with her. She did have candy at her desk, so maybe that was part of it. But he was very persistent with her. And as she got to talking, he found out that her son had just been arrested for a DUI. And this was his third one, and he was going to jail. And she didn't talk to anybody else about this, but he just persisted and found out. And she did not know Jesus at all. Never really been to church, never done anything, didn't know anything about it. But she wanted some hope. And whenever he showed that he cared, she invited him in. In a weird way, she asked us to come and pray over her son's apartment because she thought it must be demons. She asked us to exorcise his apartment. We are happy to pray. And we'll even come there to pray. But she eventually started coming to church with us. She was saved. Her son didn't go to jail, and we were with her every week while her son was in jail. All of that time, we talked about it with her every week. We celebrated the family whenever he got out of jail. We did that with her. And she was saved and held off on baptism for a long time. And another lady in the church, she had a birthday party for herself at the swimming pool, rented out the pool, and there was like the 7 of us from the church that were there, and maybe it was 10, and then the rest of her family. And we're all swimming, and this lady shows up, the one whose son went to jail, and she says, I said, I really wish you'd brought some swim clothes. She just showed up in jeans and a shirt. I said, I wish you brought some swim clothes. I'd baptize you right now. Just honestly messing with her. And she said, I don't need special clothes. And in this swimming pool, there's like 10 of us at a pool party. Our whole church is there. And all this lady's family. And I'm in swimming trunks and a t-shirt. I think I was in a shirt. And she, I don't know, it wasn't that kind of party. And she comes into the water in her jeans and her socks and her shirt that she wore to work. And we're just kind of doing our own thing in our section of the pool, our little church. And I baptize her and bring her up. And I hear applause. Like, what? And the lifeguards are clapping. The family members that are not believers but were just there, they saw that something had happened. And they were celebrating with us even though they didn't understand why. This is not because we just shared the gospel with her and prayed till the next time that we got to share the gospel, but because she was prayed with and she was invited along, and we showed that she cared, that we cared. We showed that we were different. And because of that, and her stubbornness even in baptism, because of that, when Jesus finally broke through to her, it was not because we were waiting on her. We were praying by ourselves as a church, waiting on her, but she was with us. And when we baptized her, it was a declaration to everybody at that swimming pool. Because we stopped just sharing the gospel the way that we do. And we started discipling people before they were saved. Deepen the relationship. Remember their names. Go further with them. Ask questions. Actually pray for them. And watch as they melt. Watch as they change. And then, third thing I want you to do, if they let you get through that, is present them with opportunities to trust Jesus. You can't preach at work. I'm not asking you to preach at work. I'm not even asking you to go over and say to somebody, hey, you need to read this. Here's what I want you to do. I just want you to share what Jesus is doing in your life. Be excited about it, enough to talk about it. Say, this happened with me. Invite them into your life. This is what happened. This was what I was worried about. This is what Jesus did. Or say this, hey, I was reading this week, and this was a real encouragement to me, and I was thinking about what you told me the other day, and I thought it might help you. Or my pastor said something this week, and he doesn't get it right very often, but when he does, like this is one of the things that he said, and he said this, and it reminded me of what you and I talked about last week, and I thought you might be interested in that. And spike their drink with the gospel. Slip it in so that they're not even noticing. Not you going to them to try to get them convert, but you sharing what God is doing in your life. How different would things be at work if you did that? We said, well, it'd be real different because I get fired. I don't think you would. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. But Jesus said to the disciples that were there, he said, I know I'm saying difficult things, and you have to decide, though, whether those difficult things are too hard to swallow or not. If I really am the Messiah, if I really am the Son of God, then does it matter how difficult it is? Does it matter what it's going to cost you? Or do you just do what I say? And I don't want you passing out tracts at work. I don't want you standing up on a desk preaching. I want you to pray for people. I want you to share what God has done in your life without preaching at them, just celebrating. I want you to pay attention to what's happening in their lives and pray for them and let them know that you're praying for them. And I don't think you're going to get fired, but I don't know for sure. But what I do know is he is the only Son of God. And this is what he said to do. And he is perfectly sufficient to care for you, regardless of what his obedience costs. This doesn't just have to be at work. It can be in the mom group when you all get together and go play at the park. It can be at your coffee shop that you go to. For some of you, it just needs to be your family. Around the dinner table, when you get together with your parents and your cousins. What if we stopped looking at evangelism and discipleship as specific programs that we try to put on and we try to do, but instead we saw ourselves as saved disciples of Jesus, who as a part of our being saved, tell people what Jesus has done for us and disciple people that are around us? How different would things be? I think what would happen is I think that we would see less converts who convert and then don't even remember that it happened. We had a group, when we were in Fayetteville, we had a group of about 150 teenagers come from all over the country to work with us. And there was a group of them that went door to door doing religious surveys, and they came back with 16, 17 people saved from going door to door. And it was my job to follow up with them. That was what I got to do. So I would go to this house. So I went to the first one, and I said, hey, last week we heard there was some great news. You made a profession of faith, and just wanted to come by and talk with you about that. And he said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? I said, there were some kids came to your door, and you talked to them, and he said, yeah, they were talking, but I don't know what they were talking about. And I went to house after house after house where people had dropped off the gospel to no effect. But when I see people who share the gospel and then display the gospel and disciple the people around them, I see a wildly different result. So I want to challenge you to do this. Be a disciple of Jesus. Get involved in one of our discipleship groups. It's not too late. That is never closed. Talk to Kim if you're a woman. Talk to Mike if you're a man. We'll get you in a group. Be stirred up and encouraged. Then go into your workplace, go into your family, go into your neighborhood, share the gospel, stir up and encourage other people. And see, just see, if you don't see different results. Not everyone will believe. Jesus had some that didn't believe. And if Jesus didn't bat 100 on this, you're not going to. But if you never try, then it won't matter how many would reject it. Because you never gave them the opportunity in the first place. Let us not be people who do discipleship, who do evangelism. But let us be people who are saved, who love Jesus, who've experienced that, who are excited about it, who tell other people about what God is doing in our lives and how they can receive it too, and who disciple people along the way. Let's be those people. Let's do what Jesus did. Would you stand with me? Our Heavenly Father, I want to come before you right now, and this concept is so foreign to really what I've been taught to do and raised to do, Lord. Well-meaning people have taught me that it's about sharing the gospel and then waiting, and that a disciple is someone who's saved and follows Jesus. But when I look at how you did things, what I see is example after example after example of unbelievers following you, of you inviting people who did not accept this or did not accept it till later following you, so that when they believed with understanding. And there were definitely times, Lord, where people just read and believed, or they heard and believed, and that was the beginning for them. But for most people, that's not how it works. I ask that we would be people who don't just disciple those who show up and ask to be discipled, but that we would get involved in the lives of the people around us. We would encourage them. We would pray for them. We would introduce the gospel into their lives, Lord. Help us to be those people. Not just for the results it'll bring, but because we're actually excited and grateful for what you've done for us. Let us be a church who doesn't wait for people to be saved to love them and care for them and display you. And let us be a people who follows you not just in what you say, but in how you did things. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.